Mike, I want to talk about some of these annual investor meetings that the banks are holding. Let's start with Bank America. As you mentioned before, you kind of feel like they've underperformed, and this is after a year where we saw Brian Moynihan get named chairman in addition to the CEO role. Anybody raising their hand saying, why is this happening? Why are we elevating management, celebrating them at a time when the company doesn't seem to be doing so well?
Well, that's a key question that I'll ask on May 6th in Charlotte. The CEO last week said that they missed their targets in 2014. Also in 2014, Bank of America had issues with their stress test, and they had a $4 billion capital restatement. So in the wake of these problems, why did the CEO get promoted to also have the chairman role? Would they do that for somebody who works at Bank of America? You missed your targets. Oh, by the way, you get promoted.
Does so in your view, he doesn't deserve to be chairman?
At a minimum, it's premature. Why couldn't they have had an interim chairman, at least for a couple more years, until they work through some of their issues that they've had?
Do you have someone in mind?
I think there's a lot of talent on the sidelines. But the point is, let's have more transparency. Who else did they look at? What was the process in deciding who's going to be the chairman? The reason they had the chairman split from the CEO role is because Bank of America performed so horribly during the financial crisis. Citigroup still has a chairman and CEO, but Bank of America saw to it that, hey, we'll promote the CEO even after last year was a bad year.
Does he still deserve to be CEO?
The CEO of Bank of America has done better than I had expected for the last 4 or 5 years, especially with resolving their legal issues. Having said that, is the person who helped to resolve the regulatory and legal issues of the last 4 years the right person for the next 4 or 5 years when strategy is that much more important? I think the jury is out. But I don't think he deserves to be chairman this soon.
Did they need to give this to him, though, for internal political reasons? Tom Montag has been paid more than Brian Moynihan for at least the last 2 years. So for Brian to sort of maintain his senior position, did they have to give him this job? Or otherwise, it's kind of like, well, isn't Tom the de facto boss?
Well, enough politics here. No more politics in the banking industry.
Good luck with that.
Well, let's have investors take ownership of their companies, okay? If investors don't take ownership of the companies they own on behalf of other people, then who's going to? It's Washington, D.C., it's the regulators. So it's in the entire industry's best interest that Bank of America has more transparency into their process.
One of the problems I foresee, Mike, is getting other investors on board with you, because it's not like there's an issue, right? The case around Jamie Dimon and the question as to whether he deserved to continue being chairman all had to do with his performance, I guess, in the post-crisis period in general, but most specifically with the London whale trading debacle. Fair question. He managed to keep his job as chairman, came up in 2 annual meetings in a row, and for all I know, it's going to come up again. The likelihood that he's going to be booted out of that job is probably very skinny at the moment. For Brian Moynihan, there is no catalytic issue.
It's just an eh.
Well, look, you crawl before you walk, and you walk before you run. I'm going to shift gears for 1 second. Bank of New York, last year I was on your show, and you could have said the same thing in the past year. Now you have 2 activists, very public with Bank of New York. You have 1 activist with a board position. The first time in history a major bank has had an activist on its board. So if it can happen at Bank of New York, it can happen elsewhere. I agree with you. We're not on the verge of some sort of toppling over the current CEO or anything like that, but I think it's important to raise awareness at a time when the political and regulatory environment still looks to control the banks because the industry didn't control itself during the crisis. So either we collectively do it or others will do it for us.
Before we go, why aren't more investors in financials outspoken as you are? Why does it seem that they sit back and say, thanks, Jamie Dimon, you're America's favorite banker?
Well, I think we talked to as many of the largest shareholders of these banks other than the companies themselves. And behind the scenes, a lot of the large investors are speaking up behind closed doors. So there is momentum to
more than ever now?
Absolutely. And it's not just Bank of New York. And I've heard it from more Bank of America shareholders saying, yeah, we are looking at these issues more. We are losing some patience. I got emails after being on your show last week saying, you know what? Brian Moynihan in the chairman role, we're not so sure about that. Let's keep the pressure on.